I just want to introduce this video as an inspirational story of a lady who for 24 years had CRPS, that's complex regional pain syndrome, and it started from, you might describe really quite a small incident, but you'll see how it snowballed into quite a horrific situation. And to recover from that, I'm not too sure how many people would find the courage to do it, but this lady did, and what an inspiration she is to other people who are recovering from chronic pain. And it's really worthwhile putting the kettle on, make yourself a cup of tea, and listen to this lady's story. Right, we're live from the UK and we're live from Minnesota. And if you're watching this recording, I'm hoping it's going to be inspirational, really, because I've been really looking forward to speaking to you, Susan.
Thank you. It's my honor.
We have had a little dialogue over combined groups and on Messenger just about, we have a common interest with pain. And
Yes.
From what I know about you a little bit, we both started from a point of wanting to help people with pain, and you've experienced quite a fascinating story. And I don't say that as almost it's curiously looking at how difficult it's been, but it's fascinating because it's really got a start, a middle, and it's got a beautiful ending. Or wherever you are, if you haven't ended, it's going really well. So do you mind just tell me a little bit about you and how you come to be where you're at?
Sure. I was 29. I was an ICU nurse and our ER needed help. I was called in one night to come help them. And a patient's husband was trying to be helpful and pushed a gurney that was fully loaded up and over and onto my foot. And it hurt, but I didn't have time to check it or look at it. And I finished my shift in the ER, went up to the ICU, did my shift up there. The chaos that was in the ER moved to my unit. When I got home, I took my shoe off and, my right big toe was bloody. The nail was cracked and I was exhausted. I cleaned it, put a Band-Aid on it, went to bed. 3 days later, it was infected. Went to my doctor and I'm like, I think there's like a piece of nail in there that's causing an infection. I think we need to remove it. And by the way, I can't bend the toe. Could you guys take an x-ray? So they did, and they told me it was fine. It was just a trauma. That's why I couldn't bend it. And they took out the piece of nail and said, go home and soak it. Okay, I did that. A month later, it wasn't any better and I couldn't bend it. I went to the doc and he told me, oh, just keep soaking it. The next month and the next month and the next month and the next month. And finally, after about 8 months, I'm like, look, something is not right. And so he sent me to a podiatrist, my family practice doctor did. And he's like, oh, it's just a trauma. And I'm like, from 8 months ago, could we do a scan or something? And he's like, no, there's no need for that. So when I saw him the next month, he agreed to do an x-ray. Well, the x-ray, he finally got back to me, said, well, there's a cyst in your joint. I'm thinking, yes, something we can fix. There's a cyst. This is the whole problem. So he's like, well, let's wait 6 more months and see if it goes away. Well, I couldn't stand on my foot at work. I was standing on the outside. I'd already gone through 3 pairs of sneakers in the amount of time. And I'm like, okay, what if it doesn't go away in 6 months? What do we do? And he's like, well, we'd surgically remove it. And I'm like, okay, that's what we're going to do now. So I went to surgery for a 20-minute procedure that turned into 3 hours because it wasn't a cyst. The bones were literally crushed into shards and so many pieces he couldn't even count. He wound up scooping out bone, putting in bone cement, fusing the toe, putting a screw on, sent me home and said, you will be good in 6 weeks. And I was like, okay, I wasn't upset. It was over just before Christmas. So I had Christmas and New Year's off. When you're a medical professional, you never get those 2 holidays off. So it was kind of exciting. I could be with my family. 6 weeks went by. He told me, okay, step on your foot. I couldn't step on the foot. It turned cold blue, purple, and it hurt like something I have never felt before. And I'm like, something's wrong. And he's like, no, it's just the trauma from the surgery. You just need 2 more weeks. Keep it up 2 more weeks and then come back and you'll be good. 2 weeks go by, go and see him. I'm like, look, I can't step on it. I can't stand on it. I can't drive the car. And he's like, well, you may never drive a car again. And I was like, Lord. And with that, I had my sister drive me right to my primary's office. I demanded to see him. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And he's like, I don't know. And I thought, this is crazy. So I contacted an orthopedic doctor I knew from the hospital, from working in the unit with him. And he got me right in and he looked at me and he says, I think I know what you have, but I need a bone scan. Did a bone scan. And that night, my calf now, not just the foot, the calf was cold and blue and purple. And I'm thinking, my gosh, I have a blood clot. That's what's wrong. I had surgery. I'm immobile. I have a blood clot. That's what it is. So I went to my own ER and saw one of my fave docs. And I'm like, Dave, I think I got a blood clot. And he's like, oh, it could be. And I'm like, oh, by the way, I had a bone scan done. Can you see the results? Maybe that'll tell us something. He came back and said, well, you don't have a blood clot. You have something called RSD that I don't even know what it is. Call the doc in the morning. So I did. That started my journey into chronic pain, supposed management. Went to a pain management doctor, had 4 blocks with him that didn't work. I was told the next step was the CSC trial. Of course, back in the 90s, opiates were the only answer. So of course, started me on opiates because that was going to help me. I did the CSC trial and it was a disaster. I literally was shocked the entire week. I went in on crutches. I left in a wheelchair, developed cellulitis, was in hospitals, 2 hospitals for 5 weeks. I was in a wheelchair after that. He discharged me and said there was nothing more he could do, sent me to a new guy. New guy tried some more blocks, tried a Marcaine infusion pump. Everything just made it worse. I went from now having issues only in my lower part of my right leg to now I had issues in my right arm, my back, both legs, and I was in a wheelchair. And he said he couldn't do anything more. He just upped the opiates and said, go find somebody else. So I spent time going from podiatry to ortho to pain management to anesthesiologist to my primary care. Basically just told, you're just not on enough pain meds. That's the whole problem. And that's the only thing you have that can do this. You've done everything else. Go home, live your life. I tried working with therapists at a rehabilitation center here in the States. It's now called Courage Kenny. They were world renowned. People came all over the country with spinal cord injuries to be treated there. They tried, they said there was nothing they could do to help me. So I went home and just took meds and lived in bed in my bedroom. Couldn't wear clothes, couldn't wear shoes, couldn't go outside. The wind bothered me. I ate my meals in my room. I watched TV in my room. My kids played in my room. My life was my bedroom. I could drag my body 4 feet to the bathroom. From my bed to the toilet was 4 feet. We built a house especially for my wheelchair. My whole life became, I was a wheelchair bound person who couldn't leave the house and couldn't leave bed. And if I did leave the house, it was like special occasions. And then it would take me how many days and weeks to recover from going out. The classic stories I'm sure you hear over and over again. At one point, believe it or not, I was on a high of 630 milligrams of morphine a day. 630 milligrams. As a nurse, I look back at this now and I think, what was I thinking? How did I even say yes? And then let's throw in a benzo there too with it to help with all the muscle spasms and cramps. Well, back in 2009, I went into respiratory acidosis. I've lost like 5 days. I have very little memory of. They decided it was too much opiate, so they cut that to 230. My body went through horrible withdrawal for several weeks. And then I kind of stayed on, 230 milligrams a day, around the clock. I had, instantly woke up when it was time for my meds because my body would tell me, and I honestly did not have pain relief. I did not have relief. I still hurt at like a number 8. And if you touched my legs accidentally and I wasn't prepared, it could be a 10. It's like, why am I taking this med if it's not helping me? But there's nothing else to do. So I have to live my life somehow and survive. And then in 2014, my primary doctor came to me and said, our insurance system has made a decision that we are not going to prescribe pain meds for anyone with chronic pain. So that means pain over 6 months. So we're going to wean you off and you just have to live with it. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to live with it? Well, they sent me to a pain psychologist, which took 9 months to get in to see her. I went through 21 months of weaning the morphine and the benzo. It was pretty awful, pretty awful. 2016 in January, it was my last dose. And Super Bowl Sunday in 2016, which is towards the end of January, that's when I made my first real attempt at suicide. My husband stopped me by taking away my wheelchair. I was going to go down and sit on the train tracks and just, this was no way to live. The pain psychologist was excellent. She showed me how angry I was at everybody else and how that wasn't helping me. And then she started my journey into looking at things holistically and brain retraining. And through her, I met another practitioner, and he has studied traditional Chinese medicine therapies, but he's very mind, body connected and oriented. So I had an issue after surgery in 2017 where my shoulder froze. I woke up from surgery and I couldn't move the shoulder. Had an MRI, the shoulder needs a complete replacement. The ortho doc told me it's just beyond horrid. So I'm like, all right, let's replace it. And he's like, no, you have CRPS and you're in a wheelchair. Learn to be left-handed. I'm like, what? He's like, yes, learn to be left-handed. Oh, and I'll send you to PT. They sent me to PT. They saw me twice before they discharged me and said, there's nothing we can do. Learn to be left-handed. So my practitioner is like, that is not going to work. And so he began visualizations. He would have me hold my arm on the table. He put his hand in mine and he would barely move it a half an inch. But he would have me close my eyes and talk me through, we are now moving your shoulder and your arm up and over your head. And doesn't this feel good to have it move again? And now you're going to reach over and we're going to comb your hair. And so he gave me all these visualization exercises. And I thought, this has got to be the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Except 10 months later, I don't have full range of motion, but I can move my shoulder and it does not hurt. That really started my aha moment that Western medicine doesn't typically tell you about, that, okay, somehow my brain is involved in this more than I know, and what can I learn? And that began my massive research into brain retraining. I've done DNRS, the limbic system retraining program, and that gave me some tools, but it wasn't quite enough. Lorimer Mosley's work is incredible. And then I got lucky and came across Dr. Shubner's book, your book, Rachel Zoffness, Alan Gordon, the Curable app. I've done the Pathways Pain Relief app, which is kind of similar to Curable. And it was kind of like, the more I got these little pieces of information, the more is like, okay, I don't need to wear hand splints 24 hours a day in order to do things. And I can wear clothes now, Drew. I can wear shoes. You have to understand, living in an oversized t-shirt, and that's all you could get on, and you only did that because there were people in your house, I put shoes on when I get up at 6 a.m. and I don't take them off till I go to bed, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. It's like sneakers, Drew, like real New Balance. The shoes that I wore, I have a woman's size 7 foot, which isn't real big. I had to go out and buy men's size 8.5 in the widest I could find, just to have something to put my foot in when I stepped in the snow in winter, or I stepped in the hot parking lot in summer. It was like, they were huge. I mean, I finally threw them away. I had the same pair for 10 years. I have 6 pairs of New Balance in all different colors, Drew. I mean, it's
And So
My
the trainers must mean you're mobile now, you're independent. Well, tell me
yes,
what you can do now then.
well, as he worked on my legs, and because I have contractions and got muscles moving again, and then I realized it was the wrong message that my brain was sending and receiving, and my not using the limbs was reinforcing that. The more I started taking steps. So I've been officially, like, except for super long distances, like I did our state fair in a scooter. I grocery shop in one of the electric scooters just because it's easier on me. I haven't used the wheelchair in a year. So he started me walking in a pool. So I walked in a pool back and forth, back and forth. Minnesota only has 3 months of weather you can walk in a pool. So a year ago, I joined our local YMCA. So it's a gym. And so I started walking in their pool, and I went from 1,000 steps to 4,000 steps. And they have a fitness center upstairs. And one day I forgot my headphones. And so it's really boring walking 2 hours back and forth in a pool. And I noticed the windows up above, and there were like people up there. And some were younger than me, and some looked my age. And then there were some that actually looked older than me. And so it was like, I had told them when we took the tour of the Y, no, I can't do that area. I don't need to know anything about fitness machines or any of that stuff. My curiosity got the best of me. So I went up there and looked, and oh my gosh, like 95% of the stuff, I had no clue even what these are. But one of them I recognized was a recumbent stepper. So like, I think I can do that. So my TCM's like, do it, just do it. So I started using the stepper, and I did that for a couple months. And then they had a sign up saying, use one of our trainers, get healthier, more fit. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, a trainer. Those are people that look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they're all muscly, and look at me. I'm old and overweight and totally out of shape. And that is not for me. Well, curiosity got the better of me again, and I started looking into what a trainer was. And I started noticing around the fitness center other people working with people that had like staff on their shirts. They weren't Arnold Schwarzenegger looking people. And so I thought, well, maybe they could teach me what a couple of these machines are, and then I could maybe add something else so I don't get bored. So I hired a trainer, and with luck of luck, she is in finishing up her master's program for PT. Her brother-in-law was diagnosed with CRPS. So it was kind of like we spoke the same language. And I told her, look, my brain isn't understanding what I need to do anymore. And she's like, yep. And she's like, you have muscles that aren't moving that should be moving, and you have muscles that are moving that shouldn't be moving. And she's like, we need to fix this. And so every week I saw her, and she would come up with something new for me to do, and I would do it. And by the end of summer, I decided, okay, I started walking around home without the wheelchair. I had enough chairs staked out like every 8 to 10 feet so that I knew I had something if I could sit. I'm like, okay, I've made friends at the Y. There's people there. There's a bench at the front door. There's a bench at the front desk. There's chairs outside the elevator. There are fitness machines with seats on them everywhere. The pool has benches. I'm like, I'm going to try and do this without the wheelchair. And literally I walked in, and it was like a cheering section greeted me, and they're like, we're here for you. And literally, Drew, I haven't taken the wheelchair out in public since that day. It was like it gave me the confidence that, okay, brain, we can do this again. And I couldn't drive at that time. I had to have my husband bring me back and forth. I had double vision. And as I worked with the trainer, she's like, your neck and back muscles are not connected. She's like, we need to do exercises to work on this. And we worked on my trapezius, and we worked on my chest muscles and my upper back muscles. And when I would watch TV, my son-in-law has a 75-inch screen TV. I would have to close one eye to read the guide because it was double. And one night, about 5 months after working with the trainer, I sat down and I realized I didn't have to close my eye to see the guide. It wasn't double. So I went and saw a neurological ophthalmologist, and she's like, well, what you've done is reconnect your eyes and the neural pathways from your brain by all that you're doing. And so as long as I'm upright, I can see without seeing double. Laying down, I still see double, and we're working on that. But it's like, because of all this, Drew, I can drive again. I mean, you don't understand what it's like not to drive, and you have to have everyone drive you everywhere. And then all of a sudden you can drive again. It's like, and I wouldn't be driving right now if it wasn't for all of this and the information that you and others have shared that made me realize this. Yes, this is a physical issue. It manifests physically. It's real. I mean, I had real swelling, discoloration, temperature changes. You could measure it with thermometers. I hurt. That was real. It was real. But it all was created by my brain. Now, I still have I have unlocked so much of the key of like what set me up for this. And it wasn't just the incident, that the injury that caused it. There were things that were cues that I had ignored for years. And that night was just the tipping point that told my brain, enough. I can't trust you anymore to keep us alive. So I am now going to make the decisions. And am I perfect? No, I'm not. Do I still have some issues? Yeah, I do. But you know what? I take my grandson to football practice. I can go to his games and cheer him on. I go to my other two grandsons' lacrosse games and wrestling matches. I volunteer at the Y. One of the directors there and I lead a chronic pain support group to try and give other people information. She has a background with a lot of personal trauma herself and all she has learned and overcome. And so the two of us have combined, and we're like trying to change and help one person at a time. And like I shared with you, I have a CRPS group on Facebook, and I spend a lot of time trying to help others. And if it makes one person's life a little easier, then my journey is worth it. If I've there, because my thinking is there has to be a reason all this has happened, and I can't just let it all go to waste. So it's like, if I can help make one person hurt a little less, or manage stress a little bit easier, or switch from stress breathing to abdominal breathing, or pull out a mindfulness tip when you're at a moment where you think things are just too overwhelming, and it makes their life just a little bit easier, then okay, then my journey now has meaning. Because I've always felt I was supposed to help people, and losing that ability when I lost my career, that was a tough pill to swallow. That was probably the worst part of all of it, was that I couldn't be a nurse anymore. And so now I can help others through the magic of social media and Facebook and my local community. And it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling.
It really is an inspirational story from
Thank you.
such a small, you might say, small amount of trauma. It's almost
Yes.
like it became a snowball. One
Yes.
thing seems to have led to the next. And if you looked at your reactions and the doctor's reactions to it, each one was just a similar kind of, I think it's this, I'm not too sure, it could be this, right, let's get it done.
Yes. And
Well,
then
that hasn't
when
worked. I think
nothing
it could
helped.
be this, let's see someone else, let's get it done.
Yes.
And the intent behind it becomes the driver for the pain itself, doesn't it? The intent, and it's invisible. And when you've looked at yes, there was the traumatic incident of your toe, and you were maybe overloaded at the time. Did you look a bit further back and explore? Maybe you don't have to tell the detail of it if you don't want to share, but did you pick up themes that you were maybe followed?
At the time I did not, until I read Dr. Shubner's book, yours, and Rachel Zoffness. With Dr. Shubner's book, I realized I was a perfectionist. Look, I knew at work I was a perfectionist, but that was at work. That wasn't me. That was work. You have to be a perfectionist. I did not realize how much I was a perfectionist until I was chatting with friends in group. And I'm like, my grandson made his bed because I was doing it and their parents wanted them to do it. Well, he was only, 6 at the time. And the sheet was crooked, Drew. Like it was crooked. And you have to understand, one of my instructors at nursing school was a retired Army colonel. Okay. If that quarter didn't bounce off the sheet, she ripped the sheets off and you did it again. Drew, the sheet was crooked. It was like, it was like, I couldn't leave it. I couldn't leave it. I had to straighten it because then it was better. And that was really my first light bulb moment of maybe I fit the profile, maybe, and then there were other moments, like I realized the night that I got injured, the reason I went into work is my husband had lost his job. The company closed without notice. Okay, now he was worried about money. I grew up with a mother who was constantly worried about money and couldn't manage money. So it's kind of like, after reading, I'm like, okay, well, maybe that plays a part into it. And then I swear, you and others have like literally called me out in your books, like control. I didn't think I liked control, Drew. I like control, Drew. I identified I like control. And so I feel I'm president of the Perfectionist Control Club. I do. And so I have had to learn, I'm trying, it's still work in progress, to let go of I can't control everything and all things around me. That is still a tough pill to swallow, as bad as the perfectionist pill. I mean, it's like, like I said, sometimes I felt in your book, you literally were speaking directly to me and calling me out on, and it's kind of like, I'm trying, Drew, I'm trying to let it go. But sometimes, and I have a friend, a dear friend, who constantly messages me, let it go. And then she sings like Elsa in the background from Frozen. And, one time I just told her to just shut up. And I had to move into my daughter's house because of issues with my husband. And we went from a 3,300 square foot home to 2 10 by 10 bedrooms. And I had to decide, I mean, I can't fit the whole house in here. And there were plenty of things that, okay, yeah, we don't need that. But there were many things I was like, I can't let go. And, finally my friend said to me, look, you're in an earthquake. You can only grab 5 things. What 5 things are you grabbing? Now, she lives in California, so she deals with earthquakes all the time. Minnesota, we have tornadoes, not earthquakes. I told her, would you just shut up? I said, between let it go and grabbing 5 things, you're not helping me here. But it did help me realize I had to learn to let go. And my childhood is not a traumatic childhood. I mean, I don't consider it, not compared to others. But I read Dr. Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No, and I realized my father repressed anger. He repressed a lot of the negative emotions. And every couple of years, he would explode for a day, and then things would go back. And then my mother liked to hide things from him and keep secrets because she was always so fearful. So it's kind of like, I have looked back and I'm like, okay, I was the oldest child. I was the protector of my mom, siblings. It's kind of like, okay, thanks to you guys, I can see where this has kind of led me on this path and in this journey.
Yeah. Some people feel very guilty about looking backwards and as if they have to find trauma with a capital T, but it doesn't mean that if someone has had trauma, let's say divorce or grief, or the parents being ill for a long time, or there's been separation for one reason or another, or bullying or abuse of the obvious kinds that are traumatic, they're like they're easy stamps to place on.
I mean, I was bullied in junior high, and my parents did nothing, school did nothing. But it's like it's that's in the past. It's no big deal. But when I graduated nursing school, my father, who always gave a talk whenever you were with him, you need to go to college. College is so important. Yet he didn't come to my graduation because he had to work overtime. It's like, okay, I didn't realize, 30 plus years later, I was still irritated that he didn't show up,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
that's
and it wasn't
important
until
though, isn't
Dr.
it?
Formane's book.
It's a and that's where the trauma with a little t, where
Yes.
the child's not noticed unless they are perfect. The child's voice isn't heard unless they're doing what parents want them to do. The child's voice isn't heard amongst others, where the only way they can shine is if they do something exceptional. And then the child identifies it with that type of behavior. So this is the way I need to act to be recognized by my parents, and probably how I'll need to act in society at large. And that's where you find people going into roles of care, sometimes looking after people or money. And they find it really difficult if they can't do that job. So just like you said, your pain took you away from your nursing and you really identified with that's the only way you could be good enough. And to not be able to access that is really painful, but the trying and fighting the pain to get back there means eventually it becomes freeze or fawn, and that becomes the mechanism that often keeps people stuck. They'll occasionally fight, but then they'll freeze or fawn, occasionally fight, and then you get this nervous system that's both, it's either too wired or too tired in lots of chronic conditions, but in CRPS, in chronic fatigue, in ME, in those subcategories, it's too wired and too tired at the same time. Does that make sense?
I totally understand. Yes. And I love your analogy of the little t, because many of these books I would read, I don't have trauma. I mean, I wasn't abused child. We had food on the table. It's like, I don't have backgrounds like I hear from other people. Like, but then when I start reading and looking at little things, it's kind of like, wait a minute, there's this.
I have this conversation a lot with people. Say, look, I had a great childhood. I said, it
yeah,
doesn't matter. I said, at some point in the child's perception, it's attached. The best way to behave in this moment is this behavior to make them feel better. And it takes them towards a place of safety, but it's using an adrenaline system to do it. So
and I think that's where like a lot of the need for control comes from, because
exactly,
my mother wasn't in the role. I never saw her in the role of the adult. Was kind of like I needed to be the adult in order to keep everybody moving forward and happy and safe. And I'm working on the control part. It's still a struggle.
Susan, listen, everybody loves control. I love control. You love control. But if you can keep the circle that you feel you need to control small, and if it can be your nervous system that's in an internal sense of control that you've got a priority on, that's amazing. It's when we have this internal sense of lack of control that we crave control in everything else, because that sense of unease never goes away no matter how many things you try and do.
And this is where my journey is different. Before, I had no control. Like the bed had the control, the wheelchair had the control. I couldn't do anything. Now I can make decisions. I can breathe. I can go to the Y and work out. I can go walk in the pool. I can call a friend and laugh and have a good time. I can message with people. I can help others. So that control piece, it was truly loss of control. That was really hard.
Can I ask you, now that you help people, in your groups, and whether that's one-on-one or your speaking groups or you share a community, how have you found people have received your recovery? Because I understand in some communities, if you no longer identify with them, you become attacked a little bit.
There are people that I have shared how I've improved. Some have blocked me. They're okay that I improve, but that's just me. And that doesn't mean they're going to get better, and nothing is helping them and nothing's going to make them better. I get blocked by those folks. Others aren't ready to hear their thing. Here's the hard part. We have a society where doctors and professionals are supposed to fix you, right? I mean, when you go to the doctor with a sore throat, you expect him to fix your sore throat. You go with a sinus infection, he's going to write your prescription and it's going to fix you, right? You have surgery to fix the problem. We, as medicine has advanced, we've kind of lost being the active partner in the team. We go in helpless and like, here I am, fix me. Okay, that might work for, a ruptured appendix. That might work for, a clogged vessel in your heart that caused a heart attack. Yeah, there are things a doctor can do to fix you. There are also things that the doctor alone can't fix you. You have to be an active participant. The frustrating part for so many people, especially when I tell them, look, this is neuroplastic, listen to the experts, brain retraining, it can help you. It's really frustrating because, in fact, I was chatting with a gal the other day, doesn't have CRPS. I met her elsewhere online, and she was complaining about POTS and ME. And I was like, okay, well, have you read Dr. Shubner? Page 19. It's right there on the page. I have Dr. Shubner's book pretty much memorized. And she's like, well, my dad's a doctor and he says the brain doesn't have anything to do with that. That's a frustrating part. Lorimer Moseley has been speaking since the early 2000s. Here we are 2 decades later, and still mainstream medicine is not hugely on board. And sadly, there are not PTs like you. I was lucky I finally found one this year. Okay, this is my 29th year of CRPS. I just found a guy through the pain psychologist that understands the neuroscience of all of this. He is amazing. Why did it take 29 years? I've seen how many PTs. If I go to my primary now, and I have told my primary, I'm like, he's like, you're really doing better. I don't understand. I'm like, well, I learned a lot and I've retrained the brain. And he's like, that is just really something. Thinking, yeah, and it would have been really something if, like 10 years ago, you could have handed me some information and say, let's talk about this. So I think too, this is where so many people get frustrated because their doctors aren't telling them. And then I and my group and many of my members who have improved, who come along and say, look, I know you're suffering. I know this is real and this is hard, but you got to retrain the brain. And they get upset with me and others because why should they believe some gal off of Facebook when their own doctor doesn't tell them? It's your brain and you need to retrain it. It's your oversensitive nervous system. The reason your injury is in your foot, now you're having issues in your left hand, is central sensitization. Your nervous system is oversensitive. But they're not saying that, Drew. And this is where I am forever grateful because I have sent people to join your Facebook group. And some of my members, I'm like, go check out Drew's book. I mean, go check out his group. He's got some great stuff in there. But we need the mainstream medicine to have, even if it's just one doctor in the clinic that knows this stuff, because what is it? 1 in 4 globally will deal with chronic pain at some point in their life.
Yeah, the number's phenomenal.
Isn't that, I mean, that is an epidemic, but yet that's an epidemic we are really not doing much about to help these people. And, many of my members are in rural communities where they can't find doctors. They can't find pain reprocessing therapists. They can't find pain psychologists. They can't find physical therapists that understand any of this. And then it becomes that cycle. It becomes more frustrating for them because no one's helping them. And you do need I was lucky. I had, a psychologist and another doctor that sat down and said, look, this is what's going on. But so many don't. And my group is global. We have people from New Zealand, Australia, the UK, Canada, the United States. I mean, everywhere Facebook reaches, I have over 50 countries in the group.
Wow.
Yet there's a whole lot of people not being helped. And it's not just, CRPS disorders. It's fibro, it's, TN, it's IC, it's irritable bowel. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And, and when you get that medical label, you kind of hang on to that. I have this. And, I'm lucky. Back when I got diagnosed, we didn't have Google yet. Cell phones were like briefcases back in the day. So I wasn't able to come home from the doctor's office and hit Google. And now you see CRPS, it's a suicide disease. It's number 43 or 45 on the McGill score. It's like, it's worse than childbirth. It's worse than amputation of a limb. Okay, I have worked labor and delivery. There is no way I would go up to a pregnant woman in labor and say, by the way, on the McGill score, your pain's not as bad as mine, because she would throat punch you in a minute. Your life would be over. So people then Google this stuff with their diagnosis, and they see these things that sends their fear, it skyrockets it. And then the anxiety, and then they're not getting better, and they're not going to get better because something on Google says there's no cure. This is what I hope, at least in my lifetime, we change, that the word gets out more.
Well, it's only through to you telling your story, and really is an amazing story. That do you feel lucky to be here? Really,
I do, because I almost wasn't.
Yeah, you told me that darkest point, that you to have come through that, and it absolutely didn't happen overnight for you. You kept showing up.
This has been 5 years of work. And I tell people, and people say 5 years. I'm like, hey, I got worse for 24. 5 years is nothing, and it's an everyday process. Every day I have to work on myself and watch the stress and catch the old thoughts, watch the perfectionism and the control thing, and I look at every day now is really kind of a gift. So I'm going to make the most of every darn day. I am not going to I wasted over 2 decades in bed. 2 decades. Half my life, because I'm 58. So I have had half my life of this disorder. I'm not going to waste what part of my life I have left letting this be in control. I'm going to take control back. My brain needs to understand that.
We have to celebrate every win. Your story is certainly a win. It really is.
You.
And in such a large kind of population of CRPS, where it can be very depressing, and people think, where can? It's only once they hear a voice like yours, and maybe the people that who've had similar conditions, that can recover, and Dr. Schubner's work, and Alan Gordon, and my little community, and Lauren Mosley's work, and lots of other different people across the world, and the narrative around it is growing, isn't it? It is growing. And it might be bottom up. It's certainly not top down. If it has to be bottom up, then it has to be bottom up.
Yes,
we would all be a lot happier, and it would be marketed a lot more quicker if it's top down. But I'm not too sure how strong an agenda there is for that, when there's money to be made out of ill people. But that's a separate story.
5 years ago, there was not much information out there that you could easily find. Now you can look on Facebook and do a search, and there are groups like yours and Alan's and others that, if people are looking, the message is there if they're open to hearing it.
Yeah. And sometimes they just have to sit and watch and be curious and be skeptical, and maybe ask some probing questions, and how does that relate to me? And if they're given a calm and consistent message, they'll come to decide what's best for them, whether that's to join in or not join in. And if that's the case, that is the best decision for them, because what I've learned about this work is no matter how excited you feel about the information you'd like to share with people, is if you put it out there and then let people consider it at their pace, they'll decide if and when it's right for them, or if it's right for them at all.
I know that. So my hope is we keep putting the message out there, keep putting the info out there, and a few more listen and say, you know what, I got nothing to lose. Oh, what the heck, I'll try this. It's like,
well, you have a radiant smile, Susan. You
thank
certainly
you.
shine happiness.
Thank you.
You've made me night in the UK. It's nearly 8 o'clock. I'm going to have a little walk out around the block with my wife, get some fresh air.
Well,
But
you
honestly,
go get some fresh air and enjoy. And I look forward to chatting with you again, Drew. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story. It'll be one piece of little history that will maybe pop out
Thank
there
you.
for other people to look at long after we've gone.
Thank you, Drew. You and your wife have a lovely night.
Yeah, I'll
Good
be in
night.
touch again. Thanks a lot, Susan.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.